My guest on the podcast today is Alex Harris, the founding partner of Fiat Ventures and Fiat Growth. We talked about what those two endeavors are, why Alex started them, what they're trying to accomplish in the world, and how far they've gotten thus far. We discussed the landscape of venture, what Alex would do if he was leaving a Series C or Series D stage company to start a venture company today, or a venture portfolio, venture fund. We talked about some of the patterns and trajectories of other venture studios or venture funds and dissected what works, what doesn't. We talked about the landscape of fintech at large, discussing the recent banking crisis from Alex's perspective, how crypto might influence that banking crisis and lead to an integration, conflict, or how that will get resolved with the fiat world. And lastly, we talked about what the future looks like for the economy and what he has learned in the role. So hope you enjoyed this conversation. I very much did. If you do, please give us a like, thumbs up, or share the pod wherever you listen to it. Here is Alex Harris. All right, Alex, I'm excited to be chatting with you. Why don't we kick this conversation off by giving a quick background as to what Fiat Ventures is, Fiat Growth, maybe how much you guys have raised for the fund, how much you deployed, and just generally where you guys are and what you're trying to accomplish in the world.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Yeah. As you mentioned, I'm a co-founder of Fiat Growth and Fiat Ventures. We started as Fiat Growth. Basically myself, I've been in growth my whole career, a lot of different roles. Most recently, prior to starting Fiat, was at Chime, the challenger bank. I led paid growth and partnerships there from Series A to Series D. And one of the big things I saw in running partnerships was I get to interact with all these great up-and-coming brands, and we give each other advice and try to help navigate challenges. And I found myself really loving that. So I saw the opportunity to do that at scale. So I decided to make the jump and start advising full time. So made the jump as we were closing our D round at Chime to start advising for some of these companies. For companies, Bestow Digital Life Insurance, helped them launch. Sunday, prop tech company, helped them launch. Root Insurance, they were already launched underway, helped them grow. All three of them had strong success. Two of them, Series C companies, continuing to grow. And then Root IPO'd, though it has been rough in the market. But those are the first few. And then got busy and decided to see if my good friend of 20 years, Drew Glover, would come help me because I was busy. So we talked about the landscape and what the needs were, and we decided pretty quickly to build out a unique product. We're not an agency. We're not a typical consultancy. We're hands-on in the trenches with companies who are in there trying to grow in the most effective way possible. These days, especially trying to grow in a capital efficient way. So we listened to the market and developed a company that was based on basically the needs of startups. Fast forward to today, we have 33 full-time employees. We do everything. We're a holistic growth shop. We do everything from MarTech and analytics, funnel optimization, referral campaigns, life cycle, all things paid, creative in-house. Our creative director has been with me for 12 years, did all my creative at Chime. Then we have a full partnerships team, both strategic and affiliate, influencer as well. We have a go-to-market function and a RevOps team. We also would consult on how to put together investment docs, both the process, who you should reach out to, how you should communicate with them, the actual pitch and the docs themselves. That was a big part of what we did. Because we're so embedded with the teams, really our interests are aligned. In many cases, we're getting advisor equity and often we're getting the right to invest. So we started taking the right to invest before we had the capability to invest in a large and meaningful way. We're always angel investors, but didn't have the capacity to really make some serious investment. So over time, we had proven out our track record of growth, and we decided and heard from enough people, you guys should really start a fund. And we didn't want to start a fund just to start a fund. We wanted to start a fund because we had a unique approach and we felt confidence that we really did. So we were able to bring in our good friend, Marcos Fernandez, as our managing partner of Fiat Ventures and quickly go to market. Marcos led go-to-market at SoapBuy, did some go-to-market at Brex early days, and previously led BD at Ripple. And he was kind enough to give us the time to see what we were doing at Fiat Growth and see the opportunity. And what we saw and noticed is that we actually have a unique opportunity because of our growth arm. So I gave you all that context so you can see we're actually in the trenches with companies. So we're setting up the analytics. We're interacting with all team members. So we see everything. This is past the data room and the deck. We actually see the real in the analytics. We see where the funnel is breaking and why. We have tested and we have iterated to see, can we break through and is there something here? So based on that, we raised the fund on our unique growth track record and our unique insights, essentially. And so we announced late last year our $25 million fund one. We have made over 25 investments to date. Happy to get into those and continue to grow on both the Fiat Growth and Fiat Ventures sides.
Yeah. So would you guys make investments outside of the growth business?
Yes. Yeah. Good question. So about 2/3 of our investments are companies that we have worked with previously. But so the answer is absolutely, we do. We just try to leverage our advantage to an extent. We make it very clear to companies, work with us on the Fiat Growth side because we're the best at what we do, because you want to work with us, not because you expect investment at all. They are separate entities and we leverage that insight. So, if pure numbers, we've worked with close to 120 companies to date on the Fiat Growth side, and we've made 25 investments, about 2/3 of which have been Fiat Growth clients first. So it's definitely not, they're independent it's not a feeder into investment by working with us on the growth side.
Yeah. And now what do you think of this model? I mean, if you were to talk to somebody who maybe is in a similar position, they're in, maybe exec at some Series C company, they want to branch out and do their own thing. They're debating doing some advisory work, consultancy work, spinning up an agency, or going out and raising a fund, or maybe taking this kind of hybrid approach. Do you have any advice to those people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it requires that intellectual honesty and self-awareness to know what are your superpowers? What are you uniquely positioned to do? And really leverage that, because in a lot of ways, capital is a commodity. I know it's getting harder and harder to raise these days, but you really need to think about what's your unique approach. Do you have the unique insights, unique value that you can bring? The phrase value add from investors gets thrown around a lot, but the question is, what really is that value add? So I think you need to think about what you can bring to the market in a unique way and how that can be leveraged to build a more efficient, more productive startup environment. For me, I personally believe, I obviously am a supporter of the venture capital ecosystem. However, there's a lot of inefficiencies in it. I am a builder at heart. I'm an operator at heart. And it doesn't make sense to spend 4 months a year raising money when you're leading a company and you really should be building. So there are ways to have more efficiency in building, including with venture. We've done that a few times. We've seen the opportunities where we're working closely with a company and we see, hey, there's something here. We see, hey, what would happen if we accelerated this a little bit? Should we raise a little bit of capital here? And kind of have that ongoing collaborative conversation. And then bringing in a lot of our fellow VCs who will co-invest with us because they look to us for that signal and see opportunity. So we've done that many times, and I think it builds for a more efficient building process. So for us, that's our unique. That's what we bring to the table. So I'd say for anyone out there, just have that, conversation, that thought exercise, and figure out what your unique wedge is.
Yeah, because you're not the first organization I've heard that split this up. In fact, I've gone through a couple different accelerators myself, Techstars, Science in LA, and they've raised, I think, north of 100 million Science. And don't quote me on that, somewhere in there. And so they deploy a decent amount of capital, and then they also have a team of like 30 plus people in house that do all the operational value adds, finance, marketing, et cetera. It's useful, but you are, as a agency, competing with every other agency out there. And so once you have cash, you're like, well, are these people the best for my business? The one thing that you said that seemed to really differentiate was you have the BD team in Fiat Growth side. So like being networked is a real advantage and difficult to compete with. Whereas coming up with creative content, it's like, pretty much anyone could do that. But the network effects of relationships, are there a few aspects of fiat growth that you've realized really that creates a moat or a barrier to entry for other people,
Yeah.
and why you've maybe cornered the space of like fiat fintech?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a few answers to that. One is just generally the team that we've hired. We've hired the best of the best. I'll give you one example. Our lifecycle lead led lifecycle at PayPal, Credit Karma, Prosper, and SoFi. We hire individuals like that, and we make sure that we are setting them up for success, and we hire what the market needs. So people know they're going to get excellent quality, and they also know that we're not treating them like an agency because we're taking advisor equity in many cases, especially in the early stages, because of the entire setup. Our interests are aligned from the beginning. So they're essentially hiring a team instead of the in-house team that they might be building, but they know that we have this proven track record. So we've done it time and time again. Our proven track record, both before fiat and as fiat, is a big piece and a big advantage there, and a big competitive. I'd say, the other piece that really gives us competitive advantage is, to your point, on the partnership side, especially within certain verticals like fintech. We know all the players. We have a conversation. It's easy to either have a conversation with them and say, hey, tell me what you're working on. What do you want to see? Typically these days, people are saying, okay, I want to increase ARPU, right? I want to increase my revenue per user. So I need to monetize, but I need to monetize in thoughtful ways. Here's our demographic. Here's their pain points. I want to make some authentic recommendations. So tell me what you've got. So we can sit and have that collaborative conversation instead of I'm one person pitching one thing. It's actually a real conversation of, cool, let me be a bot partner with you. How should we partner? How should we monetize? Why don't we plug in these businesses? And we're known for kind of that collaborative conversation. So there's a lot of efficiencies in that, in addition to just building out those relationships where we've got, I don't take this for granted, we've got a lot of great relationships where partners know, I just want to check in with Fiat and see what they've got going on and what they're seeing in the market. So that value does create a ton of efficiency. And there's certain pieces, especially partnerships being one of them, where we simply are the best of the best, where there are other areas where, to your point, we're very good, but so are other people. So it depends on the vertical. I would say in many of those verticals, we still are the best of the best because we've done it so many times, hired great talent, and have done it time and time again, and have the visibility of, 10 of companies doing it simultaneously. So we know what best practices are in a quickly changing market.
Yeah. Okay. So you're thinking, I'm thinking about this less in terms of assessing fiat growth and more thinking, what's the key strategic insight into the success? And it sounds like hiring good people.
Yeah.
Hard to say that's a strategic, right? Because everyone would, seems to be a little obvious. Maybe the relationship aspect is a network effect. You can consciously say one of our strategies, say someone were to spin off a Series C company and go build a network and say, I have this network that you can tap into that's hard to compete with. And you could also build a network on the investor side to save founders time for raising money.
Absolutely. And we have in basically every piece of the ecosystem, from the VCs that we closely align with to having, I'll tell you, in some cases, we have a company, StellarFi. We started working with them because we had come to know their founder in a previous context as he was thinking of starting his business when it was just an idea in his head. He came to us and we started workshopping that together. So the power of our network had introduced him while he was at Zen Business, which is, a large unicorn, and introduced him to us where we saw the opportunity to, okay, hey, I need to partner with these guys. Then we built together, introduced to other investors, and have been advising along the way. So it builds great opportunity for our relationships with VCs, with founders, with partners. There's a lot, to your point, there's a lot of value in that.
Do you think this is the inevitable pathway for venture? I mean, I see folks like A16Z that are taking like clearly a path of value add. They're not just investors. They have, I think, like hundreds of employees at this point. Like they're a large organization that does much more than just meeting with founders and sending checks. And I know that they've explicitly said that they've modeled the business of is it CAA agency? There's a very large, I think it's CAA, Creative Arts Agency. They're one of the largest talents and sports agencies in LA with 1,800 employees. And I know that the founder there was close with Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, and it kind of modeled that in venture. Do you see that model? And when I say that model, I don't even know precisely on how I would describe that. But what do you sort of see as the trajectory of the winning venture model? Because I sort of take it with an implicit assumption that if you're just raising money, writing checks, and then doing that over and over again, that's the old model. Where does that do you see that as being? Can you just do that for another 10 years?
There are a few based on name, reputation, size of fund. I think that can continue to do that. I think that will always happen to an extent. The real value add comes, I think, where the rubber meets the road. I think you can have people who will say, okay, here's the value add that we're going to bring. And it's an intro to a few people or a few conversations, some insights. I think the real value comes when you're in the trenches with the founders and the teams working on problems. We have a great growth track record. Does that mean that we know the solution always? No. It means we have a process and a plan for iteration and adapting quickly and testing. And this playbook that is a matter of testing and learning. And so I think people who can do that with you, that is a true partner. That's a true value add partner. So there are ships of people moving to do that. It is capital intensive to hire great people who can do that. Management fees only go so far. So there are a lot of funds who really can't afford to have a staff of 100 employees who are experts in that space. Many in that space, even those who add value, will actually still refer to us in areas of our specialty. And I think there is that power, and we actually see in many cases, we are that value add for a lot of other venture funds. Because of our close relationship, we can come in and help their portfolio companies grow. So we actually have the opportunity to help other funds be their value add, where they have their own value add, but they may not be able to do some of the things we can do in a hands-on way. So I think this is the trend and the desired movement. However, it is just in the constraints of the current system, not possible for everyone to do in-house.
Why not? So say today, some people, again, like later stage company, they're smart, they're well-connected, they're experienced, talented, they have some cash. They say, I want to go and start investing. But they say, hey, we want to be good. We want to win. We don't just want to be an average investor. And we want to have a fund that grows and a real reputable, venture fund. So they say, okay, we can't just allocate capital. The game has changed. We have to go and add value. So we're going to, what would you do if you were in that situation today? Would you say, hey, I'm going to go buy a few different agencies and have sort of this value add landscape and then raise money on top of that and then rebrand them all together? Or would you?
I think it depends. It depends on the amount of capital you have. And that's one of the constraints that I meant is just that just merely affording a team that can do all of these things in-house. I think you can have that kind of high level, whether it's a CMO as a service or kind of model, fractional CMO, fractional growth leader, who can kind of strategize and direct traffic and bring in other agencies. So I think lots of funds could bring in or have brought in those strategic leaders, those head of platform, they call them, head of marketing, and they'll bring them in and they can kind of direct traffic. And maybe there's some expertise in-house, but it's really hard to say, okay, I'm going to carry an analytics team of 3 who is an expert, who has expertise in setting up a MarTech stack. I'm also going to have someone who's a referral expert. I'm also going to have a creative team who can do video, UGC, traditional design, UX, all these different roles. It starts to, you have a deep series of roles that it's hard to justify bringing in-house. Again, if you have enough capital, absolutely, it makes sense. So what I see and what I'd like to see is also more operators becoming VCs. So they themselves can be that operator directing traffic to partners and other sources. And then also bringing in those roles in-house or funds, I think will be very helpful too. so they can direct traffic. And those who can afford it, I think absolutely, again, there's nothing super unique about our model. It can be certainly replicated in that way.
Do you see any, again, this is just kind of spitballing here, but if I'm thinking about this from the LP's perspective, say, you're pitching me, you want to raise a $50 million fund, and I say, okay, here's 5 million, but my only concern is that you have this side business. If a founder were to come to me, raise money and be like, I'm building the raises for this company, but I'm also like, I'm working 20 hours a week at like my mom's kitchen. I'm like, well, you got to quit that side thing and go all in if I'm going to give you this. The agency generates cash for you and for the owners. It doesn't benefit the LPs. Is there a structural concern about, because if, an LP is going to want you to take many meetings with many founders as possible to get flow to make the best investments. Does that present some challenge to work around?
It's a really good question, and we get it often. I'll say a few things. One is you are correct that for the most part, there's no direct cash benefit to an LP from the fiat growth ecosystem. However, one, it is a huge source of our deal flow, and it is our unique due diligence. So there is that benefit to them. Additionally, people often will come in and we are having that conversation and getting to know them and seeing, hey, is this an investable opportunity here? We choose who to work with on the fiat growth side. And there is a little bit of that pre-screening of like, is this an investable opportunity? So if it is, then we tend to want to take them on as a client, do that due diligence. And again, that kind of unique process that provides value. We do. Great question as to, how we split our time. We built that purposefully. We talked about it. Drew and I, at the time, managing fiat growth, we knew we can't do both things well. We were taking the right to invest, and we knew, hey, we at this point don't know enough about venture, nor do we have the time to really do it. And that's where Marcos came in. Marcos is the managing partner of Fiat Ventures. And then at the same time, we hired Gerard Vane as our managing partner of Fiat Growth. So both of them manage the day-to-day. Gerard manages everything day-to-day Fiat Growth-wise. Marcos manages everything day-to-day Fiat Ventures-wise. They talk to each other a bit, but for the most part, they're focused on that actual management. Drew and I are out there doing a number of different things, including our roles vary a little bit, but a lot of it is sourcing those deals that come into the whole fiat ecosystem pipeline. And then, myself, I'm also playing an active role in portfolio support and helping our companies grow and through challenges. So it is a great question, and it's the right question to ask. It's the question I would be asking too as an LP.
Yeah.
And so that's why we build deliberately to try to optimize and work around that challenge.
Yeah, no, I think your answer makes a lot of sense. It's like a unique value prop for diligence and sourcing. And then you also have people dedicated in each of those roles. So your time, becomes less critical to the success. I'd love to shift gears a little bit and just get your thoughts on more of the landscape. So where did you, when you were working for Chime and other companies, where did you spend the most of your time learning? Like where were you most exposed to? And do you feel like you have the unique education or insights?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the answer is mostly network and having those conversations about best practices. So it's talking through challenges with your peers. Hey, what tools are you using? What blogs are you reading? Are you seeing what tactics are working and changing? I think again, it's just the power of network. The space changes so fast. We say this, at a high level, I'd like to think I'm a half decent growth marketer and have proven that. However, if I'm not in the weed for even 6 months, everything changes so fast that I'm no longer the best one to go to for, what's working day in and day out. So that again is having those people in your network, which today I would say is our team. Our team keeps me on top of things with best practices because they are the best of the best and they are learning best practices and testing and continue to keep us informed. So I'd say it's always been that network. I'm lucky enough to have them in-house as my colleagues, but in the past, it's just been that network and, the right podcast, blogs,
sure,
Twitter, who you should be following for these trends.
Okay, let me tweak that a little bit. Can you give me an example of a time when you were at a conference or in some way networking with people, and what was the conversation about? What did was it like, hey, I noticed this credit card company is doing a deal with this one. They haven't announced it. We want to go. And like, what sort of conversation could lead to a strategic insight for the advantage of a business that would really
Yeah.
make it unique?
Yeah. I'll say one example that comes to mind was, I think, general awareness, just from the Chime days, general awareness of consumers for what they're paying in bank fees. A lot of conversations that talk about people would be surprised by them, or their balances would change and they really weren't aware. And I kind of confirmed that with a number of other leaders in the space. And so we decided to bring some transparency to that. So we ended up building a product called Bank Fee Finder, which was essentially myself, our VP of marketing, and one engineer. And what we built out was more or less, it was Plaid. And then we had to actually clean up a lot of the Plaid data, but Plaid that would connect 5 years worth of bank data, go through and then pull out and show you, hey, you've been paying hundreds of dollars in bank fees. We put out a report about it. And it was just something I'd say that we realized was an awareness issue from talking to a number of people, both actually consumers and other leaders in the space. That's one specific example of something that we built in a growth tactic we used of, hey, there's lack of awareness here. Let's make people aware of this. And then obviously Chime doesn't have bank fees. So it kind of worked in our favor there. So I think it's some of those opportunities in the landscape you'll see of lack of information, lack of awareness. There are other tactics in terms of SEO building, other tactics that have come through those conversations as well. Happy to get into those, but the Bank Fee Finder just came to mind.
Yeah, sure. No, that's a good example. How about from an industry standpoint? So what is maybe the top 2 or 3 major trends happening in fintech today?
Yeah. We actually put out frequently a trend report. So I'll speak to that, but also feel free for anyone listening to go to fiat.vc. And if you scroll down a little bit, you can see there's our trend report that we put out. A big one is embedded finance. We see that more and more, especially actually as people are looking to build effective businesses. You have a few things happen. You have businesses who are looking to monetize. And then at the same time, you have new businesses that are looking to grow in a cost-effective way. Going to direct to consumer is very expensive. And you can build great tech and in a cost-effective way, distribute it through embedded partnerships. So we've seen that time and time again. We Bestow Life Insurance, for instance, who we worked with, they power actually, if you go to Lemonade, life insurance is actually white label Bestow. Not very obvious, but that's a great embedded play. Same thing for a company called Trellis that we've worked with. They power the insurance platform for Truebill, now Rocket Money, for Chime, for several others in the space. We see this move to grow without having to basically spend $50 million to acquire this massive base. You can still acquire, and then you're sharing that revenue. So for those who have acquired the bases, they have these embedded plays to monetize in other ways to provide unique value add. So I think the embedded trend is something that we've seen growing, and we see it only continuing to grow. I think another trend that we see that's exciting is fintech bleeding into other industries. We kind of say, every company is going to be a fintech. One in particular that I really like, especially during this economic climate, is how it comes to play with health, the intersection of health and fintech. So you'll see companies, one Parachute comes to mind. They have built a better platform for collection of blood plasma. They've selected markets where it may not be easy to have a side hustle like driving for Uber or DoorDash. And so they can connect with local people, help them earn a few $1,000s a year and donate in blood plasma that's making life-saving medication. They've used technology to they've provided, a variable pricing model. So offering you different pricing, different times of day for you to come in so they can really optimize. They've used technology in that way. They've also put a payment card in the platform so they can actually pay directly. So they are a financial platform. You can actually have that payments within this process. Another that we see is a company called DANI. They are making dental insurance free for the 90 million Americans who don't have dental insurance. All you have to do is watch a video while you're brushing your teeth.
An advertisement?
Yeah. Yeah. And there are these products that could do that and kind of realign interests, and you can have that financial support, that insurance support based on different behaviors and interactions, and kind of that incentivization that can help solve real world problems of health. It's a big problem that 90 million people don't have dental insurance, and that can be solved through platforms like Dan.
As a side note on this topic in particular, my mom's a dental hygienist. I've had braces multiple times, and I'm just about halfway through this book called Jaws, which is written by an orthodontist and a guy who studied evolutionary biology. And together they wrote this book, and they recognized that there's an epidemic of malocclusion, jaw malocclusion. So jaws not properly aligning, which is the root cause of why 60 to 65% of people in the West or in America have had braces or some other orthodontic work. And if you look a few hundred years ago and beyond, for tens of thousands of years, like our caveman ancestors, they pretty much all have perfectly aligned jaws. And it's not like back then they were all crooked and broken and they needed braces but didn't have them. It's that, no, we now, due to a few different reasons, have malaligned jaws. The substance, the density of our food is very soft. From a child's young age, you're not, digesting high fibrous food. And it's actually the chewing of really high fibrous food that aligns your jaw. And we, children will drink smoothies instead of chewing on, whatever these chew on, hard meats. We cook everything and really process it. The other thing is, like, breastfeeding is small compared to what it used to be. My parents' generation, they didn't even do it. That was like the mainstream advertising was like, give them formula. And now it's starting to come back. But that actually helps to align the jaw as a young child. And then when you rest your mouth and you're not talking, breathing through your nose, closing your mouth, letting your tongue rest on the top of your mouth and lightly touch your jaws together, applies pressure and starts to form them. So even in a few hours of working, to anyone listening, do it. I do it. Wow. I used to breathe through my mouth all the time. You actually they looked at the death rates. You have a higher chance of dying if you breathe through your mouth because you're not using the filtration system of your nose, which has all the hairs and fibrous components that filter out all the stuff in the air. And so that gets in your lungs, and then you're more likely to get sick. So I boil it down to the diets of our times and the ergonomics and child rearing. So
that's little things. So what you're saying is cavemen would not have wanted to use Danny because they had perfectly aligned teeth.
I would view it as what the root cause is not it's a problems on top of problems on top of problems. Not everyone has insurance. They probably should, but why is there so much dental? Why is the whole market of dental so big in the first place? Yeah. And could you address that? Because the end solution is give people properly aligned teeth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of that also comes to, which actually we see across the ecosystem. It's an access issue. And so I think, a lot of issues can be prevented with preventative care, but many people can't afford preventative care.
Yeah.
So I think that there's many aspects that we see in this industry of access issues. And we see it, fintech really is one of the biggest tools to build back to address income inequality, access inequality, whether it's access to products and asset classes that were previously unavailable, whether it's like a Danny giving you insurance when you otherwise couldn't afford it, whether it's an awareness and an education piece. I think that kind of democratization of wealth building can come from the fintech ecosystem.
And do you wrap crypto into fintech, or would you put that in a separate bucket entirely? Do you look at that? Do you have thoughts on how they merge?
It's a really good question. I think at a high level, they're one and the same because it is, broadly speaking, movement of money and how it powers various pieces of our ecosystem. That means that they behave very differently. And I think we're at the beginning of seeing how they will merge together. We saw not very long ago saying, okay, everything with FTX, crypto's dead, as we've heard, 10 times throughout the years that crypto is dead. And that everything needs to be in fiat. The irony of our name, I realize, but we should get into later if you want. But then you have everything with SVB that has, and the fallout that we're seeing in our current banking system. So you have two platforms that are both imperfect. You have seen collapses in both. And I think, and what I hope is that we will see them converging in a lot of ways to build kind of the best of both worlds that are properly protective of consumers and the way we move money. So I think in answer to your question, high level, yes, they're the same today. There are a lot of differences, and I think those differences will become less and less over time.
This is one question I love to ask guests that come on is I sort of view them just as a backdrop as it's like water and oil where you can put them in the same platform. You can use Robinhood and buy Bitcoin right next to your Tesla stock, or Fidelity will offer the same. And so companies can offer them together, but they're as different as different can be. They're completely decoupled from each other. Yeah. And I wonder, and this is my question I put to you is, do you see an inevitable conflict of interest between the two emerging ecosystems such that people in the US dollar effectively rely on the political agenda, especially as the banking industry seems like it's going to become more consolidated and thus more closely aligned with political agendas, which to me presents a greater instability for political printing of money and political influence of interest rates, et cetera. And if and when a politician might just abuse that power, it creates an incentive for the 9 out of 10 US dollar holders that don't live in America to move into another currency. And Bitcoin seems to be just sitting there with open arms, just offering people the exit ramp. Right. We are in a wild time recording this because, SVB and Credit Suisse and other banks have collapsed and it seems to be unsettled. But what's your current thoughts on how that, if it's a transition or if it's how that gets navigated?
Yeah. It is such a complicated question. There's so many stakeholders, very powerful stakeholders. So I think,
are you worried for your life? I gotta watch what I say.
No, I think it's, what you have. I joke with our lawyers on the venture side. We're talking about AI replacing them or replacing everything. And, we were saying lawyers do a good job of keeping themselves employed. Right. And so at the same time, there's a lot of powerful government institutions that aren't going to simply let themselves be replaced. So I think through regulation, there will be, necessarily because of the way that governments are set up, there will be government intervention, whether there can be that hybrid middle ground and how they can work together. I think it will require forward-looking leaders who can look to the value of both ecosystems and how they can be brought together properly. They can't live, to your point, they can coexist in a platform, right? They can be in an app and you are both in fiat and crypto within the same platform. The industry is working on being able to switch in between seamlessly, and many providers are working on those solutions. I think it's not just, I guess my point is it's not just a technological challenge. It is a societal, governmental, regulatory challenge.
Oh yeah.
So many unknowns.
That's the big one. I mean, the question to me is like, does the U.S. Federal government view Bitcoin as a threat to the dollar? And if so, how would they ever not stop it? I mean, what are we thinking they're going to blame it on, ESG, or they're going to blame it on climate change, or they're going to blame it on national security? There's going to be some political narrative, but it's going to be like, we have to stop people from leaving US dollar to Bitcoin. And I think
FTX has been a great well, and others have been a great example of, the need for regulation and oversight. So I think the question will be at a high level, it should be, should there be regulation and oversight? Who should be that regulatory body? Should that come from within the industry? Should that come from governments? Should it be some combination? But I think whatever the reason, and I'm not saying that the reason isn't legitimate. I think there is, a lot of people lost their life savings and lots of money. There's been a lot of tragic consequences of the downfall of FTX and others. And so I think it's a matter of, can these sides come together and discuss, a properly optimized financial system that can be properly regulated. So I guess the question is, will that regulation come from within the financial ecosystem, or will it require government intervention? And then also what government policies will exist to either enable or impede those?
Mm. And how do you think about your time management with this? Because it is so much information and so much change does affect the businesses that you work with and the capital that you will have access to. How do you distribute your time to both pay attention to what's happening at a collective level, and then also get shit done on a day-to-day? Do you have a healthy suggestion or way you budget time?
I'll just be honest, that is one of my biggest challenges, absolutely. And it is one of our teams. And so I do have some suggestions, because it's something that I worry about all the time. As I was talking about, when I'm not in the weeds for 6 months, then I lose all these best practices, right? Mm. When I am not paying attention to everything. Look, there's a lot of people talking about the space right now. Most of us, myself included, are not economists. And so there's a lot that we want to learn more about. These ecosystems are so complex that we're naturally curious. But to your point, you can't spend all your time going down these rabbit holes and learning everything and becoming an expert, especially when you have, a job to do, business to run. And so I think a big piece, one thing that we do internally, we have a Slack channel for sharing learnings of things that you should know. So I think there is, again, the power of community and network for, hey, these are things you should know. So I think, align yourself with the right experts and the right network who can digest and synthesize. So I think you can have information overload. If you read articles today, you'll have people talking about, you literally have right now people talking about hyperinflation, that Bitcoin's going to be at $1 million in 90 days. At the same time, you actually have people talking about deflation and how that could occur and be the biggest risk to us all simultaneously. So depending on who you trust, you're seeing these different perspectives on these complex issues. And so I think it's a matter of choosing the right sources to read and having that network that can inform you on the important issues. So yeah, for me, it's a bit of reading and leveraging the team in our network to hopefully inform me about the right pieces. I'm doing my best. It's a challenge.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you admitting that. And interesting to hear how you think about it. Does it affect, or should it affect, your investment outlook when you say maybe a new bank is coming to you and they're trying to raise money, but the banking crisis is now happening? Whereas 2 weeks ago, they would have been, the waters are perfectly placid, but today they seem to be choppy. That would be the first and most obvious type of company that would be affected. But are there other indirect externalities from the volatile market that you're seeing on the investment side?
I mean, I'll tell you, in that scenario that someone comes to us, I'm a big believer in intellectual honesty, self-awareness. If you don't know something, that's okay, but say that you don't and tap on people who do know. So we do, when there is something that we see, if we don't know the space really well, we tap our experts. We've got a deep network of advisors, and we'll bring them in for different pieces. So in this case, it's obviously well known that there are challenges in the ecosystem. We do know the space, this particular space, fairly well, but there are a lot of complexities here. We'll see solutions that pop up, and we think about, hey, is there a real moat here? What's the competitive landscape look like? What regulatory challenges might pop up? We try to tap our experts who know way more than we do. So we know enough to know what we don't know, right? Mm-hmm. And so we tend to leverage that as we go through these processes. So I think in the situation that we had a brand new bank come in here, there's a lot that we know in that space, but there's a lot of expertise and probably economists that I want to bring in to understand what is likely to happen. I know no one knows exactly what's going to happen, but how this might impact this new business. So we kind of take that approach to any new opportunity we're looking at.
Mm. And are you seeing any particular wave of categories of companies? They tend to go in waves. Is there waves that are hot on the early seed stage now?
I mean, I'd say though, well, two things. One is we're seeing a wave of response. And I love that the reason that the government had to step in and protect startups is because startups are how we can continue to innovate and protect ourselves. You see, I love one of the best examples is Mercury over a weekend upped their FDIC insurance to $3 million from $1 million over a weekend, over the, the chaotic weekend. And so you're seeing people trying to immediately respond to this challenge and saying, okay, we need to diversify our treasury. This is how we can do it. We need to have this FDIC protection. So I think you're seeing that response immediately. A huge trend, the buzzy thing now, but I believe in it, is AI. And so that is the biggest thing popping up. And again, that becomes, because we're in the very beginning stages in many ways of AI, you have the challenge of seeing, is there actual utility here? Is this just cool because the underlying technology is cool, or is something unique and defensible here? So I'd say the most immediate or responsive to everything going on in our financial system. And then, AI is certainly the trend of the moment. I think will continue to be.
And with AI, so much is spoken about it. But one thing I'm curious from your perspective is, do you see it as a consolidated market on its lowest level? So there'll be like 2 or 3 open AI, and there'll be a few that develop really sophisticated large language models. And then there's just a wave of white labels on top of that utilize the API layer. Is that the general trajectory of how the market is growing?
Yeah, I think so. I think, everyone wants to have their solution. Everyone is like the biggest players of the space. They want to have their solution, and it's, understandable. They want to own the ecosystem, or it's relevant to search or their core business models. I think there will be a few players, just like, maybe there's a few internet browsers that we all use and a few languages that people use, that engineers use. So, there's that kind of consolidation, but the biggest approach will be actually how it is uniquely applied. And I think there's someone who can say, just like, there's a phase of like, okay, I'm Uber for weed or Uber for whatever. And so people will just apply, ChatGPT for this or AI for this, or, hey, I have a traditional business, but I'm just going to say that we're doing AI so we can get, a different valuation. The challenge will be looking and seeing, okay, is there something differentiated here? Do you have the unique capability to win? Say it's implemented in a financial space. Do you understand? Have you spent time with these big banks and understand all the compliance pieces, all the fraud and risk pieces, all these underlying challenges of the system? And if so, are you uniquely situated to navigate those challenges? So I think there will be a ton of businesses. A few of these building blocks will be consolidated, but there'll be a wide range of businesses, and the winners at the end of the day are going to be those who are uniquely situated to navigate those ecosystems and execute on both the build and the growth of those businesses.
Yeah. And it seems like, given how frequently hype or bubble cycles seem to happen, I would imagine that people are well aware of that, that they're thinking, as soon as I hear AI, quickly the conversation goes to, well, how do we know we're not in a bubble? So that gives me a little optimistic take on it, that people will hopefully at least be thinking that, when would this be a bubble? Like, what would be the potential valuations at which we're not going to go beyond, or how do we not make the same mistake we made a few years ago?
Yeah, you could. I don't think that's possible for people to not be rational, right? Like, we've seen. I've been saying, as of a lot of people, as we've been watching everything, unfold, it would be wonderful to live in a rational market when everyone is, irrationally too excited about something. And then at the same time, irrationally too down on everything. I think we're seeing a lot of spaces, insurtech being a big one. Insurtech is like a dirty word at the moment. People don't want to invest in it, but actually insurance is core to a lot of how we function, but people don't want to touch it because, valuations are down and it's gotten destroyed in the public markets. There are these, there's exuberance in it, and now there's too much pessimism. So it'd be nice to live in that kind of rational world. That being said, AI, I believe, and again, there's some regulatory risk here too, as well, putting, a lot of jobs at risk, but AI has the power really to bring in actual utility and actual cost saving immediately available, not a hypothetical in the future, but it can provide real cost savings when businesses need it most. So I think there is a ton of exuberance, and it certainly will probably bubble in a sense. But, a lot of that is honestly justified because of the use cases of AI and the utility that they're bringing.
Yeah. Yeah. And a growth is not necessarily a bubble. I think that's important to recognize too. Like there can just be a massive technological innovation. Like the iPhone, I don't think it was a bubble. Mobile wasn't a bubble, but mobile was very hotly anticipated and hugely invested in.
Totally. And I think, the bubble can be maybe on the outskirts or of the, people who tried to create maybe apps without any utility as part of the broader bubble. The hardware itself, the iPhone itself, in no way was a bubble, but there's things in the periphery that maybe could be. Same thing for AI when you have, maybe some companies feeling they need to have an AI application when it actually isn't core to their business. And, maybe those will be wasted investments, but, those who have it at its core for the business functionality, I think it's a very real, very real answer.
One litmus test I think about when gut checking whether we're in a bubble is can you see in the very near future how this technology, whatever is being proposed, is going to directly make people's lives better, faster, cheaper. And so like NFTs, they're going to be great. Why are they going to be great? Because someday they're going to be valuable. When's that someday? Oh, it's like in the future, don't worry about it. It's far, far away. The same thing with the .com bubble, where it's like, it's going to be valuable. Don't worry about it. Someday it's inevitable. Whereas like you made a really good and sort of subtle point, which is that it immediately affects the balance sheets of companies today. So that's where I'd deploy capital.
Definitely. Yeah. The speed at which it's moving is literally, I've had conversations with the company and, 3 days later, they're like, oh, next iteration is out. Technology has changed. The way things are advancing so quickly. And then also, exactly to your point, the utility it can provide in real time for these businesses that are looking to, shore up their financials.
Yeah.
If real and immediate.
We've covered some great ground. I appreciate your time, Alex. Are you active publicly on Twitter or anywhere on a personal level? We'll have links to Fiat Ventures, Fiat Growth, show notes.
Absolutely. I would say my networks of choice are LinkedIn and Twitter. Yeah. Feel free to connect with me on there. And, I'll happy to share that.
What is your Twitter handle?
My Twitter is.
All right. And is fiat in reference to fiat currency?
You make a really good question. So Drew and I, my co-founder, we met at UC Berkeley when we were students there. We wanted to make a reference to Cal. And so the motto of Cal is actually Fiat Lux, let there be light. So actually it was let there be growth. Like kind of as we were creating this, we wanted to make that reference. It did, because we do a lot of fintech, it was nice that it also had that double meaning. But yeah, it actually isn't to say that we only touch on fiat and not crypto. We own fiatcrypto.com. I bought that because, I thought it was, hey, there is a world that we do both. So yeah, we get that often, especially from anyone in the crypto space. As my favorite is someone, a well-known crypto investor was looking at our deck to potentially invest in us and said, what do you think? He said, you might as well say we invest in dinosaurs. he didn't take the time to see that like Marcos actually led BD at Ripple for 4 years and we actually juiced up in the space. He just saw the name, the Fiat, and made some assumptions. So we made a joke logo that's actually Fiat with a dinosaur behind it.
That's great. I like that a lot. It's, contrarian. Fantastic. Alex, well, really enjoyed this and wish you nothing but the best.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.